Welcome to Weekly News Highlights. In Lebanon, protests continue, sparked by a rapid fall in the Lebanese pound and mounting economic hardship. The unrest comes as Beirut holds talks with the International Monetary Fund for a reform program it hopes will secure billions of dollars in financing and put its economy back on track. More details in the following with Sheikha El Tamimi.
Lebanese protesters blocked roads with burning tires and rubbish bins across Beirut and other cities last night in renewed demonstrations, sparked by a rapid fall in the pound currency and mounting economic hardship. The Lebanese pound slid to about 5,000 to the US dollar on June 11th and has lost 70% of its value since October, when Lebanon descended into a financial crisis seen as the biggest threat to stability since the 1975-90 civil war. From the northern city of Tripoli to the southern city of Sidon, the Lebanese chanted against the political elite and set fire to major roadways across the country in the most widespread unrest since a COVID-19 lockdown imposed in mid-March. Clashes between protesters also happened both in Beirut and Tripoli, with riot police firing tear gas and protesters throwing back stones. Protesters in Tripoli, Lebanon's second biggest city, threw petrol bombs at a central bank building, setting it ablaze and prompting security forces to fire tear gas. A statement from the Prime Minister Hassan Diab's office called for an emergency cabinet meeting to be held today to discuss the monetary situation. The crisis, rooted in decades of corruption and waste, has brought soaring food prices and unemployment and capital controls that have severed Lebanese from their hard currency savings. The unrest comes as Beirut holds talks with the International Monetary Fund for a reform program in hopes of securing billions of dollars in financing and puts its economy back on track.
Iraq and the United States affirmed their commitment to the reduction of U.S. troops in Iraq as officials discussed Washington's future relationship with Baghdad. The Iraqi parliament had voted earlier this year for the departure of foreign troops from the country, as U.S. and other coalition troops have been leaving as part of a drawdown. According to a joint statement from the two countries, Washington will discuss with the Iraqi government the status of the remaining forces, stressing it does not seek permanent bases or a permanent military presence in Iraq. Moving to Afghanistan, where at least 4 people were killed after a blast inside a mosque during Friday prayers in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Interior Ministry spokesman Tariq Aryan said that the incident took place in the Karta 4 neighborhood of the city. He confirmed that at least 4 people, including the imam, were killed in the attack. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the second identical attack in Kabul in less than a month. Locally, the government recently announced that businesses, including banks, can start their activities as part of the country's phased plan to reopen the economy. The government further assigned the Central Agency for Information Technology to establish a platform where citizens and residents can make an appointment before going to any governmental institutions to facilitate social distancing in order to curb the spread of COVID-19. Our reporter Ghanwa Jabouri recently visited one of the financial institutions to better understand how operations are running amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
The banking sector has resumed work after a 3-week suspension during the full curfew due to the COVID-19 pandemic, gradually returning to normal life and allowing citizens and residents to carry out their banking activities.
We have taken an immediate action based on health authorities' recommendations to ensure that our services are as safe as possible. Also, we provided medical staff in our branches. Nobody can enter our branch without being checked for their temperature.
The banking sector currently operating have to follow a certain set of guidelines intended to protect both the employees and customers, including temperature checks, covering the mouth and nose, and wearing protective gloves.
Actually, it's not business as usual. You know, we have taken stuff in a different direction. Okay, but overall, we have been spreading awareness through our social media about our alternative channels. Customers can do anything they want from their home without visiting us. We have so many services like depositing checks through our mobile app, transferring through their accounts or internationally, free of charge.
Furthermore, banks will initially operate for 5 hours, while banks are also offering customers the option to book an appointment online to minimize time spent at the bank and to avoid queues, which is currently not permitted.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis chose the whitewashed island of Santorini last week to send a message to tourists that the country was ready to welcome them and has taken all the appropriate health measures. The Prime Minister's visit came as Greece prepared to allow international flights to its two main airports on June the 15th and to open seasonal hotels across the country. The Prime Minister also spoke with locals and medical staff at the island's hospital. Wearing a mask, he told doctors of the importance of transmitting an image of safety and organization to tourists who will arrive this summer. AstraZeneca has signed a contract with European governments to supply the region with its potential vaccine against COVID-19, the British drug maker's latest deal to pledge its drug to help combat the pandemic. The company said the contract is for up to 400 million doses of the vaccine developed by the University of Oxford, adding that it was looking to expand manufacturing of the vaccine, which it said would provide for no profit during the pandemic. The vaccine is still in clinical trials. However, if trials results convince regulators that the vaccine is safe and effective, deliveries would be expected to start by the end of 2020. The Polish-German border reopened last week, allowing people living in the border towns of Frankfurt and Słubice to freely cross the bridge over the River Oder, which separates the two countries. This week, Poland opened its borders with fellow European countries and allows international flights as the country unfreezes its economy despite an increase in COVID-19 cases. Germany also lifted border controls with Switzerland, France, Austria, and Denmark on June the 15th, and the government would reconsider if the situation deteriorates. The death toll from an oil tank truck blast in East China's Zhejiang province has risen to 19, with 172 injured still receiving medical treatment. The local government said the accident occurred on the 13th when a tank truck loaded with liquefied gas exploded near the village of Liangshan in the city of Wenling, Zhejiang province, on a section of the Shenyang-Haikou Expressway. The local firefighting department dispatched at least 34 fire engines and 138 firefighters to the scene for rescue. Special police forces, as well as local volunteers, also joined the rescue. Rescuers are currently using life detectors to search for more survivors. Venetian protesters formed a human chain along one of the city's iconic canals on June the 13th, demanding responsible tourism in the post-COVID-19 period. Some foreign tourists are already returning to enjoy the city, but local residents want the lagoon city's billion-euro tourism industry to be better regulated and avoid the mass tourism seen before the pandemic. Protesters taking part in the human chain held a 300-meter-long banner, while others held up posters saying Venice is not to eat and no big ships. Locals who are delighted to have a break from the masses of visitors that now blight their home cities, see the coronavirus crisis as a chance to tackle over-tourism, which they say has wreaked environmental havoc and ruined neighborhoods as landlords turn rental properties into holiday lets, outpricing residents. With cruises suspended, Venetians say the lagoon is looking cleaner than it has for decades, as cormorants and crabs were even spotted in St. Mark's Square during the lockdown. China's National Meteorological Center said that Typhoon Nuri landed on the coasts of the Hailing Island in the southern Guangdong province, marking the first typhoon to make landfall in China this year. To cope with the typhoon, the State Flood Control and Drought Relief Headquarters launched Level 4 emergency responses, issuing advisors to several coastal provinces. Authorities also demanded a timely warning to take precautions against mountain torrents, floods, mudslides, and landslides. The World Health Organization, or the WHO, said that the global number of confirmed COVID-19 cases exceeded 7.55 million, with over 423,000 fatalities at the time of this recording. In the United States, the number of COVID-19 cases topped 2.07 million, while Brazil has the second highest number of cases in the world. Infections have been reported in more than 210 countries and territories since the first cases were identified in China in December of 2019. 2 peacekeepers with the United Nations forces in Mali were killed in an attack on their convoy in the north of the West African nation. According to the UN mission chief in Mali, Mohamed Saleh Anadif, the logistics convoy was on a halt on the Tessalit Gao road when unidentified armed individuals attacked it and killed the 2 peacekeepers. Established in 2013, the UN peacekeeping mission has about 13,000 troops drawn from several nations deployed across the vast semi-arid country that has been facing a worsening security situation in recent years. Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido told reporters during a virtual press conference that the opposition would not recognize a, quote, false electoral body named by the government-friendly Supreme Court. Venezuela's constitution grants the power to appoint members of the National Electoral Council to Congress, but the Supreme Court, widely viewed as loyal to President Nicolas Maduro's socialist government, named its own board after ruling that the legislator had failed to do so. In response, opposition leaders denounced the move as an attempt to rig the election, and some prominent Guaido allies said that the current legislator should extend its term. Brazilians protested for and against the government of President Jair Bolsonaro this week, as the country's society remains deeply divided over political issues. Holding signs reading "Out with Bolsonaro" and "Black Lives Matter," thousands of Sao Paulo residents marched down the megacity's iconic Paulista Avenue in opposition to the government. Meanwhile, in the capital Brasilia, supporters of Bolsonaro turned out to support the president, even as the governor of the federal district closed the area around the presidential palace, ministries, the Supreme Court, and Congress to prevent people from gathering. With the closure of the central Brasilia area, known as Esplanada, the president's supporters met in other areas, including the main army quarter in the city. French President Emmanuel Macron discussed his country's deconfinement plan by portraying it as their first victory against the COVID-19 pandemic. Macron also included solutions in order to revive France's economy. Moreover, the president declared lifting the country's confinement measures, which started on the 15th of June. Macron also stressed on the importance of precautionary measures such as social distancing to stop the spread of the pandemic. More in the following report with Farah Al-Hashim.
French President Emmanuel Macron has addressed the French nation Sunday night in a televised speech and explained the country's third deconfinement plan, describing it as a first victory against the coronavirus pandemic. He also included solutions for economic recovery and announced a total lift of confinement measures starting Monday, 15th of June.
We have brought our France back, our French way of life. This doesn't mean that the virus is gone, but to survive, we must respect social distancing. This summer, we will not be like other summers, and we must overcome obstacles to live with the virus. We need strength, and we will overcome this together.
While France's aggressive lockdown contributed to a 5.3% reduction in GDP growth and the loss of nearly 500,000 jobs in the first quarter of this country has rebounded relatively quickly. Macron excluded rising taxes to finance expenses linked to the COVID crisis, announced that as of Monday, 15th of June, cafes, restaurants, universities and public places will reopen. Macron added that thousands of people lost their lives, but they are not perished from our responsibility. He also commented on the continuous political riots and protests that took place in Paris and other major cities across France in support of George Floyd, that it is impossible to erase racism from history, but not impossible to change the system and eradicate it.
Globally speaking, Macron has successfully managed the COVID-19 crisis with the confinement plan. In the beginning, it was difficult for France economically speaking, but as things started moving, things got better. But the only aspect that I am worried about is our economic future. I think his speech tonight will not make any difference, and I don't think the French government had done the necessary measures to survive in comparison with other European countries during the COVID-19 crisis. And I do not feel safe, especially on the matter of providing masks, where we were promised to have some, but that never arrived during the confinement.
I believe when President Macron is asked about a humanitarian French local matter, he rarely answers the question directly, and rather gives vague answers. I am genuinely concerned about this, and I am afraid if he doesn't do anything, it will put people's lives at risk, especially that the economy is going down, humanity is at risk. We are terrified.
Macron stressed out that in order to survive, we must look at climate challenges, reevaluate strategies of French economy by retaining European identity in check. Finally, President Macron promised to speak up to the masses next month in July and concluded that in order to survive this year, one must not forget 2020 is the year of challenges.
China's capital, Beijing, has locked down 10 more residential communities as it races to contain a fresh COVID-19 spread after it reported another 36 new cases in a single day amid an outbreak at a food market. The decision by Beijing came after Chinese Vice Premier Sun Chunlan prescribed firm and decisive measures to prevent the spread of the disease. Sun Chunlan said that the risk of the latest outbreak spreading was very high because of the market's large, densely packed, and highly mobile population. The new cases bring the number of people affected in the capital by the latest outbreak to 137 at the time of this recording. All of them are reportedly linked to the Jinfadi Wholesale Market, a food distribution center in southern Beijing, which occupies 107 hectares and supplies food to northern provinces like Shandong, Shanxi, Hebei, and Liaoning. Li Junji, deputy chief of the city's Haidian district, said that 10 residential estates around the Yuquandong market, which had COVID-19 cases linked to Jianfadi, would be locked down. The global tourism industry may be struggling, but that has not stopped China's second biggest airline from launching a new carrier in Hainan, the country's most popular island holiday destination. The new carrier, Sanya International Airlines, named after the main beach city of Hainan Province, is a joint venture between China Eastern Airlines and several other companies, including the state-owned Hainan Province Transport Investment Holding Company and Trip.com, China's largest online travel platform. China Eastern Airlines will be the majority shareholder of the new airline. Sanya International Airlines was revealed during a signing ceremony on June the 13th, held to launch the future development of Hainan as a free trade port, and is a project envisioned and personally directed by China's President Xi Jinping. Turkish warplanes struck Kurdish militant targets in various regions of northern Iraq in response to an increase in militant attacks on Turkish army bases. According to the Turkish Defense Ministry, the Claw Eagle operation has started overnight, targeting the militants in the region of its stronghold at Kandil, near the Iranian border, as well as areas of Sinjar, Zap, Avasin Basyan, and Hakuruk. Turkey regularly targets Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK, militants, both in Turkey's mainly Kurdish southeast and in northern Iraq, where the group is based. The United Nations top human rights body held an urgent debate on allegations of systemic racism, police brutality, and violence against peaceful protest in the United States on Wednesday. It said in a statement that the decision by the UN Human Rights Council followed a request last week by Burkina Faso on behalf of African countries. The African group's letter, made public by the United Nations, said the death of George Floyd is unfortunately not an isolated incident, referring to an African American who was killed last month by a Minneapolis police officer, igniting nationwide protests. It said that the international outrage provoked by the incident underlined the importance of the Human Rights Council discussing these issues, noting that 600 activist groups and victims' relatives had called for a special session. The Arab Coalition spokesperson, Colonel Turki al-Maliki, said the Arab Coalition intercepted and destroyed a ballistic missile launched by the Houthi militia towards civilian targets in Saudi Arabia's Najran. The missile was launched from the Yemeni city of Sada towards the southwestern Saudi Arabian city near the border with Yemen. Al-Maliki confirmed that the coalition has so far intercepted 313 ballistic missiles and 357 drones targeting the kingdom. Earlier, the Arab coalition intercepted and destroyed a drone launched by the Houthi militia in Yemen targeting Saudi Arabia's southwestern city of Asr. Afghanistan's government and the Taliban group agreed that Doha will be the venue for their first meeting in their peace talks. The talks, known as the Intra-Afghan Dialogue, will be the first high-level meeting between the two sides after years of fighting. No date has been announced for the meeting, but it is expected to take place after the two sides settle differences on the release by the Afghan government of 5,000 Taliban prisoners, which could be as soon as the end of next week. the Afghan government has released 3,000 Taliban prisoners so far, under an agreement signed between the United States and the insurgent group in February. The United States confirmed a report that it will amend its prohibition on U.S. companies doing business with China's Huawei to allow them to work together on setting standards for next-generation 5G networks. The U.S. Commerce Department and other agencies signed off on the rule change, which is awaiting publication in the Federal Register. The rule was sent to the Federal Register earlier this month and is set to be published soon. South Korea's Defense Ministry released a video of the explosion at the Inter-Korea Liaison Office in North Korea's Kaesong City. Tensions have risen as Pyongyang threatened to sever inter-Korean ties and take retaliatory measures over leaflets which carry messages critical of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. More details in the following with Huda Marafi.
North Korea blew up an office set up to foster better ties with South Korea in its border town of Kaesong today after it threatened to take action if North Korean defectors went ahead with a campaign to send propaganda leaflets into the north. South Korean media reported that an explosion was heard and smoke could be seen over Kaesong, and the South's Unification Ministry said the liaison office had been destroyed. It comes after the North ramped up its threats to the South, saying its army was ready to enter the demilitarized zone. South Korea's Unification Ministry, which is in charge of the inter-Korea relations, expressed deep regret over the destruction of the office that was a symbol of inter-Korean reconciliation. South Korean Vice Unification Minister Sun Ho, who co-headed the liaison office, said the incident was unprecedented in inter-Korean relations and a nonsensical act that should have not happened. The Kremlin said it was concerned about the situation on the Korean peninsula and called for restraint from all sides. Speaking to reporters on a conference call, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia was closely following developments on the Korean peninsula, but so far had no plans for high-level diplomatic contacts to ease the tensions.
The International Energy Agency, or the IEA, said that global oil demand is expected to decline by a historic 8.1 million barrels per day in 2020 due to the contraction of economic activity linked with the COVID-19 pandemic. In its June oil market report, the IEA said demand should average 91.7 million barrels per day this year, well below the projected 100 before the pandemic. But the Paris-based agency noted that its demand forecast was 500,000 barrels per day higher than previous predictions. The agency also noted that stronger first-hand demand from China accounted for the upward revision of annual demand this year, further adding that demand should rebound by 5.7 million barrels per day in 2021, as economic activity begins to resume after the pandemic, as lockdowns are starting to ease in certain countries. The Undersecretary of the Ministry of Social Affairs, Abdelaziz Shuaib, said that the Civil Service Commission approved to assign 69 employees from several government bodies to work as financial and administrative monitors in various cooperative societies. In a press statement, Shuaib explained that their approval came after successfully passing the specialized training course organized by the ministry. The Undersecretary added that the ministry has completed all procedures for appointing those who are admitted from their work, indicating that they will start work starting Sunday. A cheap and widely available drug may be able to help save the lives of patients critically ill with COVID-19. The low-dose steroid treatment dexamethasone is a major breakthrough in the fight against the deadly virus. The drug is part of the world's biggest trial, testing existing treatments to see if they also work against the virus. It cut the risk of death by a third for patients on ventilators, and for those on oxygen, it cut deaths by a fifth. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization welcomes the initial clinical trial results from the UK that show dexamethasone can be life-saving for patients who are critically ill with the virus. U.S. bank profits fell by 69.6% to $18.5 billion in the first quarter of 2020 from the year prior, as banks felt the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation reported that deteriorating economic activity caused lenders to write off delinquent debt and set aside billions of dollars to guard against future losses. Over half of all banks reported a profit decline, and 7.3% of lenders were unprofitable. The United States will impose sanctions aimed at cutting off revenue of the Syrian regime in a bid to push it back into United Nations-led negotiations and broker an end to the country's nearly decade-long war. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Kelly Craft, told the Security Council that Washington would implement the measures to prevent the Syrian regime from securing a military victory. While UN Syria mediator Geir Peterson told the Security Council he hoped to convene opposing sides in Syria's civil war in Geneva for negotiations on the constitution toward the end of August. That's it for tonight. Join us again next week for more weekly news highlights.